Hey guys, thank you all for coming. My name is Nitya.
Hi, I'm Nipha, and we are both UX researchers at Google working on emerging markets products. So today we thought we'll come and say hi and tell you a little bit about emerging markets, how they are different and unique. And we'll like to share 4 research tools with you that we have used, tried and tested, that work in these markets with their unique constraints. And then we'll leave some time at the end for a Q&A. If you'd like to tweet while we are talking, or you have something on your mind, hashtag empathy, and you can also talk to us on Spaces afterwards. Why do research? Quick show of hands, how many of you have done research for your products? All right, and how many of you have done user research for your products in emerging markets? Awesome. Okay, there's a few people, so we don't have to sell very hard. You are not your user. A lot of times when we move and develop our products, we are moving forward with our assumptions. We assume that, hey, everyone must understand what airplane mode is. Everyone must understand what going offline means. And those are just our assumptions. So don't assume, go find out what the other person thinks, and that's why you do research. When you leave your studio, your office, your workshop, you go and meet people in their environment. You not only learn about your product, but you learn about the way they live, what are their constraints. People might be living in low light conditions, people might work night shifts, and all of those things you learn when you leave your office space and meet them in their environment. And lastly, speaking as a UX researcher, it's not just the researcher's job to do the research, it's a team responsibility. It doesn't matter if you're a developer, engineer, designer, a marketing person, you need to be in there getting your hands dirty, being there, sitting next to the person who's asking the questions yourself, and learning about your product firsthand. So yeah, just join in. Nitya is going to tell us a little bit about doing research in emerging markets, and so I'm going to hand it over to her.
Thanks, Nibha. So emerging markets, to begin with, are not a homogeneous unit. Every region, every subculture is different from each other, but there are some cross-cutting characteristics across countries. Over 1 billion people are expected to come online over the next couple of years, and a majority of them are coming online in the so-called emerging markets, where over 3/4 of the world's population is concentrated. However, there are some unique characteristics, technologically, infrastructurally, socially, or culturally, that characterize emerging markets. For one, while internet is on the rise, it can still be slow and expensive as a proportion of one's income. This is Faith, who we met in Kenya. It's a pseudonym. Faith turns off her mobile data every night as she goes to sleep because she does not want to incur accidental charges. Prepaid subscription comprises the majority. Over 95% of subscriptions in India and South Africa are prepaid, quite unlike the postpaid model, which many of us may be used to, where a monthly balance is automatically paid. Prepaid involves deliberate thinking around what is the right plan for me, what is the right amount, is it 2G, 3G, or 4G? And this is a family that we met in Kolkata, where they share a phone and have a prepaid data pack on their device, and they go to the local grocery store down the street to top up their balance every week. And a majority of the users that are coming online are doing so on a mobile device, and often only on a mobile phone. This is Aditya, who we met in Jakarta in Indonesia, and he works in a shoe factory, and he owns a China-make phone, and the phone costs about $40. And a lot of these phones are sub $100. They may have small screens, they may have slots for multiple SIM cards, low internal memory, and non-compliance. So often they require us to think unconventionally about how our apps perform and work in these heterogeneous devices. So what is different about doing research, and particularly product development in emerging markets? For one, there may be time and distance factors with time zones and coordinating with remote teams and travel and jet lag. Like I mentioned, internet is on the rise, but it's still uneven and still growing. A lot of the research methods that are designed for wealthy populations or for online populations, and a lot of these assumptions break down when you go into certain user contexts. There are unique social, cultural, economic norms that characterize emerging markets that affect affordability and values around technology and aspiration around that. And there may be different environmental conditions. For example, traffic characterizes what people do in their downtime, downloading content and listening to music or watching videos on the metro or in the cab. So what this calls for is different methodological responses when doing product development and research in emerging markets. And so our usual user experience methods like A/B testing or lab studies or online video diaries may not work, because if 15% of the population is online in a country, you're getting a very biased response if you're only targeting those who are online. And what this calls for is a mix of analog and digital methods, and this is what we're going to talk to you about today. Some methods that have proven to have success in our product development.
How do we do something differently? Those are the 4 tools that we will talk to you about. Intercepts, scrolls, immersives, and click-throughs. So Nithya mentioned a lot of great challenges that come with being someone who's interested in doing product development in these markets. So now you know about the challenges. You need to come up with methods to test your product and develop your product despite those challenges. You need something that will work without connectivity, because you don't know if you're going to find it when you get there. You need it to be low cost so that you can make a lot of them and cheaply and deploy them and have your team use them while you're in the field, because you're flying halfway across the field. You need to use your time effectively. They're in person, so a lot of times you may rely on online surveys or mTurk, things like that, where the data can be really, really impersonal. But because your end user might not even be online or know how to use those tools, these are in person, and you get more feedback, richer feedback, something that you can verify was done in a good way. And they're portable, so they go along with you wherever you might be. They're resilient. When you're in these markets, you'd be surprised by the number of things your environment might throw at you. You might find yourself on a boat. You might find yourself in a participant's home where they have a cat, they have a dog, they have a pet monkey. It might happen. It happens. And so these methods need to be resilient and survive through all of those different environments that you might or might not encounter. As with every other tool, when you are using these through product development, you need to know when to use which one. Some of them, of course, lend themselves to anytime, anywhere across that product development lifecycle. Others are more effective when you use them when you have something more tangible to show people, or when you're just trying to identify what your opportunity space might be. And as we go through each method, we'll tell you which one is a good fit for when. So with that, Nithya is going to tell us about Intercepts.
Thanks, Nibha. So Intercepts allow us to conduct spot interviews, and they maximize on time and give us a lot of learning in a very short period of time. So for example, this is our team in Kampala in Uganda, where we approached a taxi stand and spoke to taxi drivers about how they were using mobile devices and applications for taxis and in their day-to-day. So Intercepts are spot interviews that are conducted in naturalistic environments where people hang out, relax, play, or work. And they help us build a strong foundational understanding of different user groups and the context and their practices. So when should you use Intercepts? Use it to gather several data points in a very short period of time. It's amazing in a day how many different sites and populations that you can encounter For example, you could go to the marketplace, you could go to the church or the temple or to the water pump and have very different conversations with different demographics. Use it for broad as well as tactical questions. So intercepts can be used throughout the life cycle of the product, in fact, to build early on, to build a strong foundation of who are our users and what are their practices and behaviors and values, but also for very tactical product specific questions where Niba will walk us through some of these techniques a little later, where you can take in a product prototype or UI and get specific feedback on the features. And use it to gather an understanding of different demographics in various naturalistic contexts outside of the lab, which is where people are. Why should you use it? It helps us understand how people think and use technology outside of a lab. Often a lab is a good place to get very tactical feedback, but it is an artificial environment where someone comes into an office or a conference room within four walls. So Intercepts helps us get out of the lab and go around the city or the country. And you cut down on recruitment and logistical costs. You have to plan a set of research questions and a script and be deliberate about which groups and sites you want to go to. But that's about it. There isn't really any cost involved in recruiting a particular type of users or bringing them to the office. So how do we go about doing intercepts? And each of you has a handout. Some of you may have the intercept handout. So if you don't, please share it with your neighbor. So the steps involved are, as always with any research technique, identify your goals and come up with your questions. And then identify the locations that you want to visit that are relevant to your product users. And you can do this in coordination with your local team. And once you're at a particular site or with the user group, establish rapport. So you have a short period of time to gain their trust and build a relationship with the community. Always seek permission before you begin. I'll talk about informed consent in a second, but disclose who you are. Always seek permission to record audio or video. This can be hypersensitive in some user groups, so do seek permission. Plan for onlookers. You may start a conversation with one person, and soon in a public space you may end up with 10 other people who are onlookers who join the conversation. So account for that, and if you want to have a private conversation, account for that. And take notes. Some places and groups that you can go to. Remember, the field is all around you, and so any taxi ride can be a good place for an intercept, for example. Gender balance, often there are more men than women in the public sphere, so you may have to seek out female heavy spaces, and that may mean going to the marketplace or getting a haircut. Sample on the go, because this is dynamic in the research approach. You don't know who you're going to get. So try to balance age, gender, income groups, so you don't end up talking to only one type of a person. So what's informed consent? This is the starting point for any research interview. Disclose who you are, where you come from, what you're representing, what is the conversation going to be about, what are the risks and benefits of the conversation, and what are you going to do with the idea, how are you going to collect the information and store it. For intercepts, often cash is not the right response to thank somebody, and that's where contextual gifts are more helpful. For example, when we conduct interviews with shopkeepers, we end up buying stuff from their shops. We end up with a lot of bananas and fruits. Consider what's economically appropriate. Giving a gift card for Amazon may not be the right thing to do for a low-income resident. But the most important thing in any research is to stay genuine, show that you care about their response, listen, and that really helps your participant want to share more. Mind the gap. There is a definite gap often between the researcher and the participant. So try to understand local norms, local attires, phrases, if any, and try to bridge the gap. This may mean sitting on the floor, being aware of your surroundings and responding local language is important. So even if a community is able to express in English, their local language may be what they're comfortable with. So find interpreters. And go light in the field. Notebooks are, and going analog is often the best way to take notes because it's transparent. Your participant can see what you're capturing, and it reduces the barrier between you and the participant by not having a technology that you're typing notes into, and it's also safe. So in summary, there was a lot of points. Some steps for conducting intercepts are know your questions, identify locations, and once you're in the location, start by building trust and consent, get consent and permission, and be aware of the surroundings. Respond if you get a large group of people, plan accordingly and move accordingly. Niba will talk to us about scrolls now.
All right, so Nidya mentioned in her last slide going light, and this is perfect because scrolls are exactly what they sound like. They are made of paper, and there are a lot of papers stuck together with tape to form one giant roll of paper. It's a user journey. It's a story that you want your user to tell you. It's your product's journey, but you want to hear it from the user and how they're interpreting it and how they think they will progress through it. When should you use it? When you are in the early stages of development. You kind of know what your problem space is. You want to understand what's the best way to solve for it. You create an entire portfolio of different concepts. Maybe a person can listen to songs by going online. Maybe they can listen to it by downloading it. Maybe they can listen to it by sharing it with their friend. Maybe it's a collective app. So there are many different ways of solving the same problem, and you want to go in with your concepts. And this is a great tool to do that because you can get, it's so low fidelity, it's so cheap to make. You can get a lot of feedback in the same session. It's also really great for when you want to capture passage of time because it's a linear scroll. So you can, if you want to say, and imagine that you were going on a bus when this happened, just put a bus there. Or imagine overnight, this thing happens on your phone. And so you just put a moon there. Or you went to sleep and next morning you saw something like that. It's really easy to convey those points of details through pictures. So step 1. Always start with what are the goals of the study, what are the hypotheses that you want to test. Map out the steps you want to build into your journey, and then in the last vignette you can see adding contextual cues, like if you want to put a bus, put it there. If you want to put an overnight concept, put a clock or a moon or whatever it is that you feel comfortable with. And then you get crafty. You get a printer, you print out all the different things that you want to have in the story, and you tape them all up, you put them in the right sequence, and you roll it up, and you are ready to go. Last step, manage the expectations of your participant. Tell them, hey, this is something that we are going to do together. You hold one side, I'm going to unroll it from the side, you roll it back up on the other side, and we're going to look at one screen at a time, and you tell me what is happening. So it's a great conversational piece. You're breaking down a lot of barriers. There's no, Nitya also talked about minding the gap. This is a great way to come on the same level as them and make them feel useful and familiar. You're no longer the interviewer, you're going through the story together, and you can really hear it from their perspective. And of course, if after doing this for 5 times, you realize something is really, really wrong with your story, just untape it, stick a few other screens in there, and you have a new iteration on your concept, and you can do the next 5 sessions with that version. So it's really cheap, really fast. Why should you use it? I think I talked to you a lot about these things. When you're still in your wireframing stage, you don't have your app ready, you don't have your product ready, this is a really good way to get that early feedback. It's really good for simulating loading states because of all the visuals that you can use. You don't have to have deeply complex interactions coded up to get responses to. Imagine you had to wait for 10 minutes. You don't have to get them to wait for 10 minutes. You can just have that be part of your story that you're telling to each other. And it really allows your users to feel comfortable with the medium, which is paper. It's tactile, it's familiar, and it's not overwhelming like technology can be sometimes. I think a bunch of you have the scroll sheet, so if you have it and your neighbor doesn't, please exchange, and this is a good way to find out who's sitting next to you. Immersives.
So immersives are activities to understand the local experience. Often when we travel to a country to do research, it's very easy to stay within the comfort zone of a 5-star hotel or a nice taxi ride, or just doing the things that we're familiar and comfortable with. Immersives are activities that are planned around experiencing the local point of view, where it's not necessarily about an interview or a conversation with the participant, but it is about using the researcher as the instrument for research and talking about one's own felt experiences. When should you use immersives? Use it every time you go into the field. Step out of the office and try to plan activities that you can do on your own or as a team. Use it to complement participant research. You may get very different points of view when you experience things for yourself. Use it as a team to understand various perspectives. Each of us in a product team brings together our own values and backgrounds and biases and the way we see the world, and often this is a good way to go on or to participate in an activity together and talk about it and exchange notes on how you felt and experienced. Why should you do it? You avoid parachuting into a particular context and gathering only a few data points and thinking that you have the entire story. Often the story is outside of the 4 walls. So immersives help us understand what the larger cultural social context is. And our assumptions and hypotheses get challenged or validated. To build a product, we go in with certain propositions and assumptions, and immersives help us participate in the local activities to know if it makes sense or not. So steps to immerse yourself. One is to identify activities that are relevant for your product. For example, if you're building a payment system, you may want to go into the marketplace and buy a few things and bargain and see how that whole offline process of payments works. If you're building a mobile application, you may want to go into a mobile shop, purchase a phone, have the mobile seller set it up for you, top it up with mobile data and load a few applications to understand really how that particular community interfaces with mobile phones for the first time. Or go to a cyber cafe to understand how internet is used in public places and the role of a social agent or the cyber cafe owner in educating their customers on how to set up an account for the first time. Engage with your local team for advice, or local experts or people from a particular country, and really try to avoid the touristy things. The goal here is to understand the everyday mundane experiences of the community that you're trying to work with. And this may mean taking public transport or in order to understand what people do when they're waiting for a bus or when they're in a crowd versus when they have a seat on the bus and they get to relax and take out their phone. So try to go local when you go into a particular context. Try to get out of your comfort zone, and this might mean buying a local phone, setting it up with a local SIM card and a local data plan. Some of the spaces and activities that are highly insightful are marketplaces, religious sites where you can see how communities come together and what their values are, bus rides, local sports, getting your hair done, and so on. So step 2 is to allow time to acclimatize. For any international research trip, there is jet lag and travel. So account for that. Different people respond differently to stress in the field, and fieldwork is really tiring and challenging, as exhilarating as it can be. So account for that. Understand how your team members respond to stress and plan activities around that. Safety first, and balance work with fun. It's important to take breaks in the field and step away for some time in order to regain your lens. So in your handouts, you have all the steps. And back to Niba.
All right, so this is our 4th and final research tool. Click-throughs, and again, I am in charge of all the literal methods here. Click-throughs are exactly what they sound like. It's a bunch of images put in a serial order. Have you guys used click-throughs before? Raise your hand if you've used one. Excellent. Okay, so this is basically a low fidelity version of what we are used to here. It's a collection of images put in a serial order, and you put them on your phone and you're ready to go. It gives you an illusion of progress because when you tap on one image, it goes to the next image naturally. So you can imagine that you're clicking on a button and that's taking you to the next screen, but it's just the program progressing through static images. When should you use it? Again, while you're waiting for the actual product to be coded and programmed, you can go in with early wireframes or low fidelity mocks or high fidelity mocks. So this is something that you would use towards the fag end of your product development cycle when you're ready to go, but you're still waiting for those final interactions to come in. More importantly, the version that we're going to share with you today, it's about not relying on the internet. So this works completely offline. You can use it wherever and on whichever device you like. So a lot of times you will encounter phones that are on old GMS cores or have outdated versions of whatever it is that you were trying to test, or you'll just find ridiculous things when you go out in the field. And this will overcome any of those things because all phones have photo galleries, and so you can work with that. This is something that you will use to make it more real than it actually is. So you can do a lot of amazing smoke and mirror techniques because you're basically creating an illusion of control and progression without having to code any of those buttons in. Again, start with the tasks that you want to test. Make up the rough screens that you want to depict in that task. In what order should they appear? And if you're working on slides, you're working on Illustrator, Sketch, whatever it is the program of your choice where you're developing your screens, you take screenshots that would be the exact same size as the phone, or it matches the phone size so that it looks like a live screen on the phone. Once you've got all your screenshots in place, rename those in the right order so that they appear in the right order when you have them on your phone. So you can go like homepage, screen 1. When I click on the tab, that's screen 2. When it shows up a search button, that's screen 3. Whatever is the progression, rename it accordingly. And then get your images onto your phone, get into the gallery, find that folder, click on the first image, put it in full screen mode, and your prototype is ready to go. Of course, for a lot of these participants, and you can also, of course, use something like a peer-to-peer sharing app like ShareIt or Zender and put it on your participants' phone. So they get a really good first-hand experience of, imagine this app was on your phone, and that's a very different response that you would get from, hey, on my Nexus 6, this looks like this. What do you think? And they've never seen a screen that size. So this makes it really versatile, and once you're with them, you can set the expectations of, hey, when you click, it'll go to the next one. So before you click on it, tell me what you think is happening here, and then what do you expect will happen when you click on this button, and then you progress through the next one. So you manage their expectations a little bit, and then you basically hand it over. And it's also really easy to do this for feedback collection because you already know what were the screens that you were testing. So you can summarize all your findings at the end of that day to say, on screen 1 we found these things were great, these are the things that we need to fix, and on screen 2 people were really confused about what was happening. We really need to go back and look at that problem again. So this is our summary of an offline click-through prototype using phone gallery. So if you have comments, thoughts, do tag them with #empathy. All right, thank you.
Thank you, guys.